これはキッシュ。スパイシーな和風カレーキッシュなの。かぼちゃにベーコン、キノコもたっぷりの。
Shoot. Well, now I'm hungry. As a wise man once said, real men eat quiche. And if I can't pronounce things. Help. Help, Google.
Kakuriyo.
And if Kakuriyo-Bed and breakfast is to be believed, so do disaster-stopping monsters. So for a quiche worthy of a sea god, what you're going to need are 6 eggs, 2 cups of dairy, salt, a par-baked pie crust. And then for the items unique to the episode, 8 ounces of sliced mushrooms cooked, 1 cup of kabocha squash / pumpkin, I think, 2 tablespoons of curry powder, and 1 tablespoon of ground turmeric. Some bacon. Totally real bacon, I promise. For a quote-unquote quick pie crust, you could either buy your own, which I don't recommend, or you can break out your second favorite food processor and add 1 old-fashioned purifying salt. And remember that you forgot to plug in the food processor. Oops. Clamp on the lid. It's weird to do this backwards. I don't know if you've had any experience trying to cook backwards, but it's weird. And just pulse once or twice. Okay, that wasn't the pulse button, but you get the point. And then we add 8 tablespoons of cold butter. Plop, 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 plop. And process for like 10 seconds until it's kind of coarse, sandy-like. And now that we have a good sandy texture, in fact, maybe I'll bring the camera over for a sec. A nice sandy texture, even if it's rough and coarse and gets everywhere. Wee. Oh, jeez. Cat. It generally takes 3 tablespoons of water. And you want it to just come together. And what you're looking for is to be able to form a ball of dough. This actually feels good. It might even be just a touch too wet. Turn it out onto the countertop. And we want to bring this together into a bowl. So this goes in the fridge after being covered in plastic wrap. Let's go get the plastic wrap. Mummify your dough ball in plastic wrap and either freeze for 10 minutes or refrigerate for 30. I actually don't know which I'm gonna pick right now. My freezer's kind of full. Ta-da! Wait, ta-da! Now that the dough's about as chill as I am, floured surface, plop, and roll it out. Looks like maybe I'm a little too chill. We're looking for it to be slightly longer and wider. I guess just wider because it's a circle. Than our pie plate. Quiches aren't pies, they're just savory pies. Like cheesecake. Debate in the comments if you think cheesecake is a pie or a cake. I know what the right answer is. It's a pie! And if you feel that the dough might be getting a little too warm, which you don't want because that'll melt the butter and it'll ruin your crust's texture, you can either throw it back in the freezer, or you could have pre-frozen like a cookie sheet And then press that on top for a bit to help it cool down. And I always recommend kind of rolling it up onto the rolling pin and transferring it that way. I've never successfully done that, but it looks like I might have to try because the dough's gotten a little too warm. You didn't see that. Anytime I make a mistake, I can just edit it out. I did not center that properly. It's not funny anymore. I admit, not the prettiest crust I've ever made. I'd always guess that your crust is going to shrink a bit. So I'm actually going to extend that other side a little bit. And then before we're going to chill it, I'm going to put on a little bit of tin foil and some pie weights. And evenly distributed as you can. If you don't have metal beads like these, you could also use just uncooked rice or dried beans, and the oven won't even harm them that much. So, into said freezer for 30 minutes, the fridge for an hour, and then we'll be moving into the oven.
Line bake the crust for like 7 minutes at 375 degrees Fahrenheit.
We are also going to need to prepare some totally real, definitely not fake, plant-based, actual, truly bacon. That doesn't even look passable, does it? Just pretend it's real bacon, for me. Definitely doesn't smell like liquid smoke and lies. Yeah, ignore that broken piece. It's supposed to be broken. And flip. Oops. The chefs in the show also specifically mentioned mushrooms, but are not specific enough to mention what kind. So I'm going to go with 8 ounces of button mushrooms. And then before adding any fat, I can just cook them with a little bit of water. Which I think helps them to break down a bit more and brown a bit more nicely. I don't have the science for you. Cinder, pet the Cinder. She's a modern Stone Age family cat from the town of Cinder. She is cute. Are you aware of that? Once the water is all gone, we can add a pat of butter and then continue to cook down the mushrooms. I don't know why I'm talking. Maybe I'll just do the rest of the episode silent. Those look good enough to me. So the episode in question mentions pumpkin specifically. So I'm guessing that would be Japanese pumpkin, which would be kombucha? Kabocha. It sounds too much like kombucha, and I'm always gonna get it wrong. Kabocha squash. / also called pumpkin. And it's kind of difficult to get where I live, so there are other options. Supposedly sweet potatoes are a good substitution, as is acorn squash, as is butternut squash. And so I'm going to use this butternut squash. And because I don't feel like peeling and slicing the whole darn thing, I'm just gonna roast it whole. So this goes in an oven set to, I think it's 375. Subtitles will correct me right here. And the size of this squash, it's probably gonna take about an hour. And you're gonna wanna rotate it as soon as one side gets soft. And the other thing you're going to need to do is go all dun 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 dun. And your squash is done when it is nice and browned and soft. That might be a little too soft, to be honest. Oh. The only part of this you're not going to want, other than the skin most likely, are these seeds. I know you can roast pumpkin seeds. I don't think I've seen roasted squash seeds as much of a thing. And we're going to cube and use, I don't know, I guess a cup? We'll see what looks right. This is something I'm just guessing on. I'm sure the subtitles will correct me somewhere with whatever my final decision was. I don't know how big the chunks should be either. Like a big dumb smile. Ta-da! So in the show, the spice mix used was a pre-blend given to her by another character. But in this case, I'm going to one-up the show by making my own garam masala. 2 teaspoons of coriander seed. I only have powder though, but this is a case of do as I say, not as I do, because I don't want to go grocery shopping. I'm sorry. And then 1.5 teaspoons, also called half a tablespoon, of black pepper. 1 teaspoon of cumin seed, which I actually have whole like I was supposed to. 1/4 of mustard seed. That's it for the spices that need to be toasted in a dry pan until they start to be fragrant. Ah, that's so much better than anything you get out of a jar. What is that? You call that a spice grinder? No sir, we call it Mr. Coffee. But yeah, it's a spice grinder. So we add our cooled and toasted spices to the spice grinder, along with a shake of red pepper flake. I guess I'd say that's about 1/4 teaspoon. 2 whole cloves. All I have left in here is clove powder though, apparently. So I'll have to guesstimate. 1/4 teaspoon of cardamom. Hey, what's a mother's favorite spice? Cardamom. Oh, it's not funny. Enough of a cinnamon stick to give you about 1/2 teaspoon. That's too much. That's probably still too much. And that's probably enough of a cinnamon stick. And then in order to get the color that was shown in the episode, which seemed to me like there was a lot of turmeric. So I'm adding a whole tablespoon of turmeric. And if the quiche ends up like tang orange, we'll know why. It was me, all along. It was me, turmeric. Ooh. Ooh, yeah, that smells like curry. To our 6 eggs, we add our dairy. 1, 2. And also a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, curry powder, and turmeric. Now that I look at it, that looks like a lot of spices. Oh well. And I prefer to blend up quiches with one of these immersion blenders, because I like the more homogeneity you get out of it. But you could just use a whisk or even a fork. There you go, that looks like a color. And then we also add our cubed squash, our mushrooms and bacon, and give a mix with the spatula I kept nearby. I don't know, this looks like the least appetizing, and Cinder agrees, this is like the least appetizing quiche I've ever mixed up. Why? Because it's missing cheese. I didn't think to put cheese in this because that didn't seem right to me. And then we add it to our cooled, pre-baked crust. Bleh, bleh, bleh. All the inclusions are hanging out near the bottom. And then into the 325 oven we go. for the amount of time I'm putting on the screen right here because I forget. Ta-da! But the real question is, in addition to, does it taste any good? Will this quiche give me the supernatural power to fight off earthquakes? There's also really bad wind in the background. I hope you can't hear that. Oh, you know what? It actually kind of looks like it did on the show. This is our quiche. And just cutting into it, it smells. Yes, it smells. I would say it smells mostly like the warming spices that went into the quiche. The cinnamon and the cloves specifically. And I kind of like the distribution. It's fun to look at. You can see like the cubes of squash, you can see the mushroom, the totally real bacon. This side's also good. So in terms of aesthetics, other than the fact that the top is kind of burnt, I like the way it looks. And now, our feature presentation. I can't use a fork properly. That's our feature. I hope you liked our feature of me can't use fork. And I actually have one of every element in this bite, so it's the perfect bite to try this out with. It tastes good. So I put this in the good category, but like leaning towards, when I say something's fine. So, it's like fine plus or good minus. It's on the upper end of fine. I like that second bite more than the first. The most prominent element that you taste is actually the salt of the bacon in there. I'm surprised with all that curry spice that went in there, it's not as prominent. It's there, but it's it's a light front note and then a lot of back note of curry. Let me actually try it again. But otherwise, it's kind of good. There's enough texture variety to keep it interesting, because you have the kind of slightly softened bacon, you have the cubes of squash, and then you have the mushrooms that are kind of chewy. So you get soft, chewy, and crunchy. The taste is good. The main body of it tastes a good level of spice now that I've eaten more of it. I think if it was more heavily curried, it might be overwhelming. That's good. I like it. Lower the squash and up the other elements. And I'm also curious if having the actual kabocha pumpkin, almost said kombucha, kabocha pumpkin / kabocha squash / whatever you call it, would make it better. I don't like that. That's good. I take it back. The squash is fine. I think that the dish overall is good. And so if I had to rate it out of... I know, it's my own recipe this time. It's kind of weird to rate my own recipe, although this is my first time making it for you, the internet, and ever. But I'm a little biased because it's my idea, taken from a show that I like. So if I had to rate this, I would rate it the number of Kakuriyo episodes times 3 out of 100. So thank you very much for watching this kind of different episode of Nerd Cuisine. I hope you enjoyed journeying through this new recipe with me. And if you try it at home and it turned out well, let me know. If it turned out terrible, feel free to tell me. If you have any other ideas for shows that contain recipes that you're interested in me cooking, let me know, because this was actually kind of fun to try. I'd always wanted to try making this since I saw the season finale of the show. I guess I should mark this whole episode as a spoiler, huh? Kakuriyo bread and breakfast for bread and breakfast.